In March 1954, Sister Jerome and Sister Laura Sherbring drove with chauffeur Leroy Birch and a farm helper to purchase 5 Aberdeen Angus steers at the price of $565 delivered, which they intended to raise for butchering the next fall. The old gray barn near the back of the convent and on the back road to Immaculate Conception Academy had to be torn down to make room for the new Holy Family Hall Infirmary in 1959. To replace it, a large barn for an increasing number of cattle pushed its way into the skyline along the ridge of the hill east of the mother house. Next to the $20,000 barn was built a $6,000 corn crib. Today, the big white barn has another use, having been transformed in spring 1973 into a recreation place for children in a summer enrichment program. Because the farm was too small to be profitable, the sisters went out of the farming business in 1970, renting a portion of their 208 acres to Robert Kaufman of Asbury. In an auction that December, machinery, feed, and grain were sold for a good price despite sleet and cold. Proceeds of the sale were used for new $65,000 steam mains installed that year. For many sisters, the auction brought a sense of loss. There had been a long history of closeness of community and soil.
My father was a third-generation farmer, and this past summer for our parcel of the land, we got a 150-year Heritage Award. My youngest brother, Peter, is currently farming, and we have to wait 11 more years for the homestead to get the same award. That's a long time for family farming, and we are proud of it. I'm Sister Lois Erpelding, just newly retired to Clare House, but farm is really in my blood. I think it's in my genes. Again, my name is Sister Lois, and that's special. I don't know why my parents named me Lois, but if you turn the letters around, you got soil, you got silo, and you have oils. I grew up with a farm that had a big silo, but it was taken down this past year because it needed to go. And in religious life, I have worked a lot with sacraments, preparing families and individuals for sacraments that utilized oil in the sacrament ritual. But soil, yes, is important to me.
We knew that we were cared for an awful lot. We were well loved and cared for. If we needed punishing, there was always a belt behind the door. I don't know that it ever got used much, but it was always, we were reminded that it was back there. Hi, my name is Carol. I'm Sister Carol now, Hemesath. Our farm was located, we like to say, kind of right in the middle between Kelmer and Ocean and Pistina. And the reason that was significant is because my dad came from Ocean, my mom came from Pistina, and we came from Kelmer. And we had a little bitty farm, 120 acres, pretty small, very diversified, which means, we didn't know what that meant, but it meant that you had everything, a little of everything. I was the oldest that didn't carry a lot of honor once in a while. And then 2 brothers coming along rather closely after me, and we fought a lot, but I loved them to pieces. And then a little space, we never knew what that was all about, and then 2 more sisters. To this day, we are all on this earth. I'm 84, but all 5 of us are here yet, and we are quite close.
I very much experience God in nature. You know, it's like I just have to walk out and I'll see something unusual. Like even the other day I saw this leaf fluttering down and I thought, now how did it know when it was going to release and how it fell and where it fell? You know, and all those little things you don't think about sometimes, but you think. And I know God doesn't control all that in a sense, but it just is a wonderment. And so it's beyond my comprehension a lot of times how God is present and in nature and in people too. Well, I'm Sister Marie Cigrand, and I grew up on a farm in Dubuque County. And some people might know where the Dubuque County golf course is, Fillmore Golf Course. I grew up on that road up the hill, and we grew up on about a 200, almost 300-acre farm, and about 100 acres of that was timber or whatever was and that held a lot of fun times during the summertime.
One of the things that came out in a class reunion a few years ago were jobs that we had or things that we did on the farm. And I remember walking the beans and the corn, and some of the city people said, "What do you mean walking beans?" We walked beans to pull out the cockaburs and the corn stalks that did not belong in the bean field. So that was some good walking.
We had quite a big garden. So we grew a lot of like corn, sweet corn and potatoes and carrots, but the usual kind of stuff is in the garden. But also because I grew up with 3 sisters and no brothers, we also were needed to help outside. We were lucky enough though that my dad's brother lived with us too, so they farmed together. But the girls, as we were called, were always asked to, go out and help with the hay and unload the hay to put it in the elevator and so on, and help with the planting of oats in the spring. And early on we had chickens. And of course we always had to go out to the chicken house and pick the eggs out, which wasn't the most pleasant thing because once in a while we'd get pecked by the hens because they didn't want to give up their eggs.
During farm times, I would feed the chickens and gather the eggs, which were not my favorite.
Chickens, which I hated with all my heart and soul. They were smelly and they picked at me, and I didn't know what to do besides cry.
It was good. I mean, it was good to have all the fresh vegetables and the meat from the cattle and the hogs.
I also would occasionally cut the grass, which got me outside again, and raked leaves in the fall. Sometimes jumped when we were younger in the leaves and messed them up again.
Along with all the chores, which I didn't get into much besides the chickens, my brothers always got to do things before I did. That was kind of the male thing of the culture. I know it was. It carries on even to this day. Not really. But the boys got to go when there'd be new calves or new pigs or new horses. And I never got to do things like that. I had to learn all this stuff the hard way.
Inside work, when I was inside, it was cleaning the house, scrubbing the floors, listening to the Iowa football games or the Dodgers baseball games at night. It was cooking, especially primarily doing all the cooking and some of the baking throughout my high school years. I was in 4-H, so that really nourished some of my skills.
And just another thing that probably, I won't say complicated the matters though, because my mom died when I was about 8. And so I had 2 older sisters and a younger sister, and luckily my 2 grandmas. And so they helped a lot. But we as the girls had to learn how to do the cooking pretty fast. And so we took care of the house, housework, and did the cooking and so on. And then sometimes we still were asked to go out, and do some of the work during the summer months and things. I learned a lot about tools because they would be up, my uncle or my dad would be up fixing something, up in the yard, and they'd say, "Go get a crescent wrench." So I'd run down to the, shed and find the crescent wrench. I need this kind of a pliers, and I'd run down and get the pliers, so I knew what all those tools were.
I'm aware that our dad was enterprising. He not only read a lot, but he also put things together in a way that I knew that his own brothers or our neighbors didn't. He was able to think through things that others just didn't, were not able to realize. he belonged to several different boards in the county, which meant that he had drive and directives. I think it bothered my mom at times, I'm pretty sure, because she did not have a driver's license, and she was kind of stuck at home, and that had some significance. We knew how to help bring her along when she felt as though she was a second-rate citizen, because I think there was some of that. I think I'm probably more into women's issues for that reason than I would have been otherwise.
Family time unusually would be making homemade sausage, which was really good. We had our own sausage grinder, butchering chickens. So we had a lot of meat. We had our own pork, beef, and chicken. And in the heat of the summer, before air conditioning and before a lot of fans, we harvested our garden, made vegetable mixture. Hundreds of jars of vegetables went down in our storage area.
I remember one time I was in high school and I went to, I don't know, my friends and I we were just talking about what we had for supper last night. And I said, oh, we had steak again. And they were like, you had steak? You know, for us, steak wasn't anything special because we had it all the time on the farm. So it was just kind of funny, the different reactions that you get from what you shared and so on.
How have I continued this in the present? For many years, I've written the parish prayer of the faithful for Sunday, and I would intersperse prayers for farmers, for farm workers, for their safety, perhaps for rain, for whatever was needed, for safe harvesting as well. I get excited as I read scripture, and every once in a while there's a wonderful scripture quote on soil or land, that we will be resettled on our soil. And that just continues to speak to me.
And my family's very close, I think partially because of my mom dying so young. So, my sisters and I are very close. And we really, I see that extended through through their families too, and how close their families are. I think it was probably because of my dad and that, and really valuing what God has given us and how we are to be able to use what God has given, hopefully for the betterment of society and as a whole. And it's not just for us to gain wealth or whatever. It's to really try to reach out and use our gifts and so on to help others.
Farming is a really special call. For one thing, it provides lots of avenues of possibility that many other work positions in no way provide. If you've got a desire at all to do your own reaching out and not be dependent on those whom you could lean on, you'd be very wise to do a lot of reading, to do some reaching out to county offices. I think that the richness of the profession is something that can't be weighed or overestimated. It's got so much creativity about it and value for the life that we would propose.
I'm Sister Rosemary Vaske, or sometimes they call me Rosie Vaske. And I grew up in Remsen, Iowa, which is northwest of Remsen, which is close to the Sioux City area. I would say some of my fondest memories were all the things that my mom and dad had to do at home. We did not have a lot of big equipment. Mom did her washing by hand, and we hung clothes up on the clothesline outside when the weather was nice.
My last year in high school, my parents gave me the job, completely responsible for all the cultivating of the corn, all by myself, whenever. And the funny thing was, many of the neighboring farmers knew that. So who did they talk to about what the crops were looking like? It was the funniest thing, because I'm like, these guys would never otherwise talk to any teenage girl about what the crops looked like. I'm Sister Frances Nosbisch, and I grew up on a farm just outside of the little town of North Washington, Iowa. And it's now a century farm, been in the family for a long time.
I grew up on a farm that's a century farm now, so I believe my ancestors were people who respected the soil, respected life on a farm. I am Sister Lila Hellman. I grew up in Bancroft, Iowa, a small farm on the south side of town. I came from a family of 7 children, and we all worked together on this farm.
I still believe in trusting in the Lord. As a farmer's daughter, that's what you have to do. Trust that what will be provided will be there for you. Mm-hmm. And that carries through in my own life. To trust the Lord. Sufficient is the grace that God will give you for the day. My name is Sister Kate Gall, and I grew up on a farm very, very close to Luxembourg, Iowa. So the address is New Vienna, but my grade school and my first 10 years were at Holy Trinity Church in Luxembourg, and then I graduated from Leo High School, Consolidated Catholic School in Holy Cross. So where am I from? Luxembourg, New Vienna address, and Holy Cross High School graduate.
Mom and Dad had a big garden, 2 big gardens really. And one was out in the field. There was about an acre garden out there that had all kinds of vegetables in, potatoes, pumpkins, you name it, Mom grew it. And Mom had to do the canning. She didn't have a lot of freezers yet at that time. Dad had quite a few cows that we milked day and night. And pigs to feed, chickens, gathered the eggs and took care of the chickens. And I just marveled at how they were able to do their work.
I was, of course, needing to help in the house with Mom, with cooking and so on. But also, as soon as I was old enough, my dad had me coming out and helping with taking care of the animals, feeding animals and so on. And then as soon as he thought I was able, he had me on a tractor out in the fields, and I came really to appreciate the time that allowed me kind of for thinking and, just kind of thinking my own thoughts and being by myself. Because being the oldest of 10, it was pretty hectic in the house. So I appreciated that very much.
Some of my fondest memories of growing up start about the age I was about, I suppose, 5 or 6, when I loved following my dad. I pretended I had a bushel basket, which was just a tiny basket, but it resembled my father's, and he and I would do chores together. My little basket would be filled with corn, and his bushel basket would be filled with lots of corn. But I would follow him, and as he fed the pigs, so did I. When he took corn that was ground up to the chickens, so did I. And we had a lot of fun doing this together. But my mother was also in the picture, because my mother would have to do the separator chores. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but after cows were milked, the milk went through a separator. And all of those discs or that machine had to be washed daily. While my mother was washing the machine, I didn't want any part of it, so I would swing on the barn doors. And my sisters also liked to swing on the barn doors, so sometimes there were fights, which, well, you know, as children are.
Sundays, we always went to Mass, either all together, or sometimes someone to the early Mass and someone to the later Mass. And a lot of times we had fried chicken and mashed potatoes for the dinner. We visited relatives quite a bit during the summertime and early fall. On Sunday evenings, because when we got home early if we visited cousins, then we did chores early because we didn't have all that other work. And so then Dad would do 500. He would bat the ball out to us, and we would have fun enjoying that. And then we'd go home, get into the house for a wonderful evening meal that Mom prepared.
Being in a big family, I appreciated the opportunity to go out and do things on my own. So part of it was I enjoyed that time actually driving tractor in the field, cultivating corn, whatever it was, gave me a lot of alone time to think, and actually I did a lot of thinking about what I wanted to do in life. I found myself sometimes sort of reflecting on certain psalms. Imagine that. One of my favorites of that time period, I didn't know the number of it, but I knew the psalm basically was Psalm 8. And so I get amused sometimes when I go back and look at that psalm and think about what that meant to me in those early years.
Some of the values that were instilled in me or that I learned was do my best at whatever I am doing. I know how to work. It doesn't bother me to work. And I'm not afraid of trying different things or new things. And some of the challenges was doing the chores morning and evening by milking cows, helping to pick up the chicken eggs, feeding the pigs, then helping with gardening and canning.
Oh, challenges. Oh, yes. We had a big lawn. In those days, which was in, the 40s, lawnmowers weren't what they are today. They were push mowers. And we were pretty young yet, but we had to mow this lawn. And it took two of us to push the mower to go back and forth. And again, we would take turns because there were 5 girls in our family, and 4 of us were pretty close in age. And so 2 of us would push the mower, and then we'd get to the other end, and we'd make 1 round, and then 2 more would make the other round. And then we'd take turns, and finally that big lawn would be mowed.
But it was a joy and a challenge to learn to work together. We had to work as a family, doing different chores. A fun challenge that I had was my brother Ron and I are close in age, and we still had a part-time wood stove and a part-time gas stove. So to get the wood, we had to bring that in from the summer kitchen, and he would not like to do that at times. And so one time I said, "It's your turn," and with that, the Santa Claus face knocked on the window in the kitchen, and boy, my brother Ron and I decided no longer to argue about getting that wood in.
There was lots of joys with this too. We played many games outside as a family. We would play volleyball, softball. Many times Dad would do the pitching. And we had 2 different teams, and we would have fun trying to hit the ball. Then in the wintertime, we also had other games when it was too hard to go outside.
My mom's mother and dad died quite young, and so she was the oldest of the family. So she made it a point to try to have us gather as a family one time of the year. So that was carried over also on my dad's side. My dad was the youngest of 14, and so When my grandmother lived with us on the farm for a while, we had a lot of visitors and a lot of cousins. So that was, again, important of having family time, connecting with cousins. And my mother would always prepare a meal. Sometimes at Christmas, she prepared 2 meals. Someone would come for the dinner and some would come for supper. She loved to cook, so she was very dedicated to family meals, time together.
We would get the old potatoes out of the basement, and Mother would have us help her cut the potatoes that were going to be planted, and we'd always have to make sure there was an eye, 1 eye or 2 eyes showing. And then these we would go out, ride out on the back of a trailer and go out to the patch where we were going to plant potatoes. And that was always a family project. Maybe we didn't, have straight rows, but we had a lot of fun planting potatoes. And then watching them grow. As hills of potatoes grow, it's fascinating how they form, they shape. And then in the fall, we'd all get together again, and somebody would do the digger. I'm not even sure what kind it was anymore, but they would run the digger through the potatoes, and then we'd all have to pick them up and get the dirt off of them and get them ready to put in the basement again. So potato planting was always a lot of fun and a lot of work.
Sometimes in the evening, in the summertime, after supper, I would ask if it would be okay if I leave the table and go out. My parents would say yes. I'd go out, and we had a big old swing out behind the house, and I would go out there and I'd swing, and again, it was just time to be by myself and think my own thoughts. And I mean, as a typical teenager, kind of, whatever teenagers think about in those days.
I remember one time my brother Alfred, who took over the farm when my dad passed, he and I were outside and by the field, and he said, "Isn't it amazing? You put a little seed in the ground, and all of a sudden up this corn grows." And that mystery of life and growth, the calmness and importance of contemplation, just to being with good earth, the beauty of the earth, values of family prayer. We prayed the rosary during the month of October. We prayed the rosary during the season of Lent. As we got a little bit older, we ended up being when Mom got older, it was only a decade of the rosary in October and a decade of the rosary in Lent. So the value of prayer, Sunday Mass, sometimes once a month we'd go to Saturday afternoon confessions. So the sacramental life was very, very important.
I think Dad had a lot of faith that he showed in harvesting and planting. He would plant the seeds and then just wait for them to grow and mature. He seemed to trust that things would grow and that he would have a harvest to crop. And he didn't have any big machinery. Sometimes we went out and helped pick the corn and throw it into the basket, into the wagon. But they did the best they could in those days. And I just remember when Dad got his first tractor, he rode a tractor around in the yard as if it was a toy. And I just thought, this is important for him to have a tractor. Before that, we had 2 horses to help with some of the work.
I think that this, again, I mentioned about working in the fields by myself. It was a lot of reflection time, and I think it's when I sorted through for myself that I wanted to check out whether I should be a sister. And I remember, again, having this sense about prayer, the awesomeness of nature. Yeah, I don't know, the whole thing was just conducive for me, anyway, to a growing spirituality. And so to this day, I really appreciate being out in nature. And so for me, although the little creek that ran through our farm wasn't like impressive body of water, but over the years I also have found that I like sometimes just going and sitting and looking at bodies of water. It's just calming and reflective time for me. So altogether, I know that I just have this great appreciation for nature from the fact that I grew up on a farm surrounded by nature in many forms.
I know my great-grandparents were the first settlers at New Vienna, Iowa. And I read their history and I know how they came and built log cabins, how they came and cleared the land so that they had a farm to farm. And as a child, I would go to those farms in New Vienna, even though I was from Bancroft. And it was always a thrill to see and respect what my ancestors had done to that part of the state of Iowa. And now I believe that I am still part of that.
I at times go out to the farm now. My brother Alfred is on the homestead farm, so and parts of the house is 150 years old. And I just go on the weekends because he's a bachelor, and I just enjoy cleaning up the house. And not too long ago was a Saturday night, and it was a little getting to be dark. He was not home yet from his work, and so I just went outside, and it was about 15 minutes. I just walked around and looked at the sky, the quiet sky, saw the freshness, harvested fields, and the moon was starting to come out to be full moon. It was just perfect quiet, and horizon was pink because it was setting sun, and all I could think of was, I am so grateful for this good earth and the values of family home, a place to call home.
But Dad just knew that everything would be developed at the end of the season. Dad trusted God and knew that it would all turn out all right.
I think with my faith, I learned that land was a precious gift. My dad had such a love of the land. You know, the farm that he was on, my youngest brother is on now, the farm that my oldest brother is on, has been in our family, great-grandparents, for almost 150 years. So there's just a pride in that, and a real care for the land. I'm Sister Janet May, and some of my fondest memories of growing up on the farm was having my mother teach me how to bake and cook, especially making bread and pies, which I love to do today too. And also we did the gardening together, and we canned a lot of things, especially in the summertime. So basically we could live off the farm products in the winter.
I think, being with the animals, we had cows and chickens and steers and pigs. Just being around them was, it was just kind of a spiritual experience. Sometimes we had wild ducks land, and they'd sit and lay eggs and hatch the young ones, so that was a big thrill to see those ducks. I am Sister Carol Ann Bertie, and I grew up on rather a large farm in northwest Iowa in Humboldt County.
I don't like to fail. I want if I promise someone that I'm going to do something, I will do it. Always, if you're going to do something, you want to do it in the best way possible. I'm Sister Marjorie Staudt. I grew up on a farm near Marble Rock, Iowa. Actually, my grandparents settled there in about 1888. My parents, of course, lived there. My dad was born there, so he lived there his whole life. The farm is a century farm. It's beyond that, but it has that designation.
I think we learned a great reverence for creation. We had a large garden, raised many of our crops, all of our vegetables, did the canning. We were close to nature, and there was no cement that we had to walk on. We had the ground. My name is Sister Ruth Elsbernd. I came from a little family farm in northeastern Iowa. Towns that are located around it are Ocean, Festina, that was our parish, that's where we went to school. And we are in the township of Decorah.
Some other things I really treasure and remember are just all the birthing things that happen on the farm. You know, finding butterflies and having them, seeing what a cocoon looks like, seeing baby pigs born, or a calf, and then learning how to feed the calf, teaching it to drink. And one time I even helped my dad deliver a lamb, and that was so exciting. As a younger child, I remember bringing home baby mice once, these little pink mice, and my mother was saying, well, you don't bring them home, you know. And also another time I brought home tadpoles, and I didn't know what they were. And then I later found out they were baby frogs. So all of that kind of thing, like when it rained, the worms would come out of the ground, and I just got kind of fascinated with all that. And I think it really led me to major in biology, because I loved working with all these animals.
Some of the things that I did on the farm was to gather the eggs and clean them, put them in their container. I helped my mother with the garden, not only with planting, but with weeding, which we had a large garden and a lot of produce. And I came from a large family. I'm number 9 in a family of 13. I never had to help milk the cows because I had plenty of brothers, but I did go out to the barn a lot to watch the barn swallows, and they just fascinated me as they flew out and sat on the high wires. And also, we had cats around the barn, so I love those cats.
I am so glad I grew up on a farm. We were close to nature. We were family bonded. Dad was always with us, not away somewhere working. We worked together. Some of my favorite memories are of the small animals as we would get little chicks. They were so soft. They didn't have feathers yet, so they were just the soft down. And their darling little cheep, 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 cheep. Was fun to watch them as they moved around in the chicken coop. Other new life that thrilled me was when the little pigs arrived. And there would be a whole group of them surrounding their mother to be fed. And it was fun to see this lineup of little pigs having their dinner. Fun to watch them run around.
When I grew up, it was a farm of cattle, hogs, chickens, raised oats, corn, and beans in a great rotation, as they did in those days. I have 3 brothers, 3 younger brothers. One survives yet, and he is on that farm, still operating it at this point.
I also was very inspired by just seeing how plants grew. Like when we plant something, we'd watch for those first little buds to come out. Or we'd find a nest of eggs that we knew the mother robin was going to sit on. And we would watch until the baby birds came out. So all of that kind of thing, and rainbows. There was nothing like the smell of rain, you know, after a rainstorm, and then to see the rainbow come out. So the sky always seems so big, and the smell of fresh clover. All of those are great kinds of experiences.
Probably one of the disadvantages of growing up on a farm was the idea that we never got to know other cultures, how they lived, their foods and their entertainment. And we were quite a distance from the library and social events.
Milking was a chore every morning and evening. That perhaps would be one of the trials, to be so tied to a morning and evening job. However, my dad and brothers gave me the cows that did less kicking, so I fared well. We sat on a little stool. It had a board on top and then 2 legs to hold it. And sometimes when we were mischievous and the cats were around, we would squirt them and they would gobble up the milk as fast as they could.
I think one of the great social events that we had was the school and the church and my relatives. I had a number of aunts and uncles and lots of cousins, so we would get together a lot and we had a lot of fun. We would play a lot of softball. We had a large yard with a yard light in it. Even into the evening sometimes we were playing softball. Those are some of my favorite memories.
My brothers, all ended up farming. The first one he learned from our father. The second one got a degree in agriculture from Iowa State, and the third one never studied agriculture, but he's putting it in practice now. Those young farmers, when they heard about no-till farming, they started doing it. And they said the neighbors all laughed at them. And for quite a while, the neighbors laughed at them. But now when I go home, I see more and more have adopted that practice. And I'm very proud of them that they realized that the soil was worth protecting and cherishing. And they really worked at it throughout their farming careers and continue to do that.
I just hear a lot about how the soil is being depleted and ruined with chemicals. And so that bothers me because it was not that way. My father, I don't think, ever used any fertilizer except the manure from the cows and the pigs. Farms were small. Ours was rather large, but how hard they worked to plow the land, to till the soil, to cultivate. Farm life is so different now. My sister now, I was home not too long ago. They have this huge combine and 4 huge wagons, just huge for the grain.
Well, especially as I'm learning more about our climate, I have developed such a deeper appreciation over the years. I don't call it dirt, it's soil, because it's living. And I'm upset a little bit about all of the things that are put into our soil, but I'm also appreciative of the developments that are happening. People are planting cover crops so that during the winter the soil can be regenerated in that way. Our land is not very erodible because it's so flat. So unless there's a terrible rain, we wouldn't have a lot of erosion. When I came here to the Mount and saw a different type of soil, then I realized what a gift ours was. All of the emphasis, Pope Francis, Laudato Si, all the emphasis now on protecting the land, it resonates in my heart. It really does.
We lived simply, and we were very saving. My mother recycled everything. I learned how to wash tin foil and save plastic bags, and I still do that today. And also patching clothes. We never wasted food. So I learned how to patch and sew.
I think the farm life helped us to be very close to God. We're close to nature. We couldn't help but find God's closeness. And also our family being together for every meal, our prayers before meals and after meals, the devotion to Mass on Sunday. We were still getting German sermons, and I remember hearing them as a child and not quite understanding it all. I remember that Dad, too, by example more than anything, showed his deep faith. He insisted that we go to first Mass because that's when we could receive communion. Fasting was from midnight in those days, but there were no announcements made. So let's go to a second Mass and hear the announcements. And the whole family went with him. And sometimes in the afternoon, we also had Vespers. So church was very much a part of our lives. It was nice.
We didn't live that far from the church. My parents were very faith-filled people. And so we would go to church as a family, and during Lent we prayed the Rosary together. So I learned a lot of faith values from them. And my dad always said we plant and then we let God do the rest. There is such a faith that I think farmers have to have. They have to wait till the rain comes and trust. They put the seeds in the ground, they tend them, and then the rest is up to God. So I think faith really comes through strongly on a farm.
Well, I just have a few things. This is the house in which I was born. It will be 100 years old next year. My brother lives there. And this is a view of the farm, the farmstead, and that dates back to 1882 when my grandparents moved there. Let's see. As I said, I'm proud of my brothers. This is my brother Dennis, and at the state fair this year, he and his wife received the Iowa Farm Environmental Leader Award, and this is given annually to a farmer who uses soil conservation practices, cover crops, pollinator plots, and reduced tillage. So I'm proud of him.
If you could relive a day, what would that look like?
I would probably like to see if they had a garden, go out to the cornfields and see how the corn is. I know today they plant it very close together. Years ago we didn't. There were rows. I don't think that's true anymore. Just like to see how they do it. Walk through a pasture.
And then my favorite time for the last years when I had a choice, when I was no longer teaching, I tried to go home always in harvest time. And I would get to ride around and just to watch the crop being harvested. It's you realize God's bounty and how we need to protect it. So here I am standing beside him as they're unloading a couple loads of corn. I've missed that in COVID times, but maybe it'll happen again. Who knows?
It's that faith and trust in God, that you do what you can do, you do your job, and then you let go. And you just have to trust that God will provide.
One final question. What message would you give to young farmers today?
I would just tell them to really be grateful that they can be young farmers. To enjoy Mother Earth, to see the spiritual God's presence in all of that.
I just, this is a field rock that I found on the farm. I went searching for it because, you never know how long. I hope the land stays in our family for a long time, but I wanted something that I could keep with me. This is the foundation of my farming life, a rock from our fields. And so I will keep that for a long time.
So I have given you pretty much of some of the things I remember. I hope you enjoyed hearing them. I hope you could picture the little chicks and the little pigs and our grabbing the legs of the chickens to bring them in. The milking that was a daily chore, and the fun with our kittens and puppies. And the freedom, the space, going out to the fields, the wideness, being so close to earth. So I tell you, this growing up on a farm is a good thing, and I am so grateful.